So I am telling this story at the risk of sounding like I am ripping off the Blair Witch Project. There are some similarities, but for the most part, it is not the Blair Witch, and this is not Hollywood. This story comes from real life, and I should also mention that I don't die at the end. Spoiler alert! My friends and I are university students in the filmmaking program, and for a group project, we had to write a story, film it, and then present it. There were 4 of us in the group: Angie, Kyle, Jake, and myself. The story we decided to write and perform was a story that would be about survival. 2 hikers deep in the woods, one gets injured badly and needs medical attention. The story would be about survival, yes, but also problem solving and one having to go find help. It was meant to be more of an adventure with maybe a bear stalking the hikers, but certainly no witch. And in order to film this, we had to go hiking and camping. There was a national park about 50 miles away where camping was permitted, deep in the woods. And if we got lost or injured, we knew help wouldn't be that far since it was a national park. We decided to make this trek during the middle of October. Nights were cool, but the days were still fairly mild, and the colors of the trees were amazing. By now, you have probably already noticed the similarities to the Blair Witch Project. Students hiking for a school project, October, woods, cameras, and all that fun stuff. But trust me, this is not the Blair Witch, and things get real fast. So, we arrive at the national park, sign in and register with the park's office. Jake parked his car in the parking lot, and then we were on our way. It was going to be a great weekend. The weather called for sunny skies and mild temperatures, and with the sun shining, the orange leaves seemed to cast an orange glow on everything. It was beautiful. We get on our way, our heavy backpacks and gear on our backs. We followed a trail that took us deeper into the woods. A couple of weeks before, the national park had sent me a map in the mail, along with a brochure. We picked our spots on the map that we felt would be the best for filming. Our first location was coming up, and we were looking forward to getting these heavy bags off of our backs. We arrived and dropped our gear and made jokes about how out of shape we were. Then it was time to get to work. We had already done some filming for a short movie at Angie's house, the part of the story that introduces you to the characters. The filming in the woods would be the climax to our movie. We decided the injured character would be Kyle when he falls down an embankment. If we couldn't find an embankment, we would say he stepped in a rabbit hole and breaks his ankle or something like that. Angie was to be the hero and is the one responsible for getting help in an area with no cell service. Jake and I were doing the filming and directing. Our story was going to be badass. We decided we would camp out for the night in the spot. And even better, we found an embankment. A small stream with a bank on each side would come in handy for how Kyle gets injured. Filmmaker's luck. We decided to get out the cameras and make sure all was working fine. They were. It was now heading into late afternoon. The sun would be setting in about 3 hours. We set up our tents and managed to film the scene where Kyle gets injured. When night fell, we filmed a few more scenes. It was during the night filming that something strange happened. While filming inside Kyle's tent, something hit the side of it, and pretty hard. We heard it land with a soft thud when it hit the dirt ground. We looked at each other, wondering what had happened. But when it didn't happen again, we went back to filming. And then it did happen again, and it almost hit Jake. He pointed his camera to the ground to shine on whatever almost hit him. It was a rock, and a nice-sized one, too. We then all looked towards the trees in the direction the rock was thrown. All we could see was darkness. But rocks don't throw themselves. Someone was obviously out here playing with us. Not cool. We grabbed our flashlights, and all 4 of us went searching for our prankster. "Who's ever out here throwing rocks? Not cool, buddy," I yelled. We shone our flashlights to the trees, but so far saw nothing out of the ordinary. We even pointed the lights up into the trees. Nothing. "Bears don't throw rocks, do they?" Angie asked. We all looked at her, perplexed and pondering the question. It was doubtful about bears throwing rocks, but now just the thought that a bear may be nearby was kind of unsettling. We saw nothing and headed back to camp. Whoever or whatever it was seemed to be gone. For now. It was still dark outside when I awakened a few hours later by what sounded like an animal rummaging around my tent. My first thought was a raccoon, and then I remembered the possible bear. I lay quietly, listening. If it was a bear, it was likely looking for food. It wouldn't be interested in the tents. I heard movement from Jake's tent beside mine and wondered if he had been awakened too. And then suddenly, I froze in terror. If that wasn't bad enough, that sound was followed with... Now everyone in the camp was awake. As we lay there listening, we heard what sounded like branches being broken and ripped off from their parent trees. When whatever it was that was outside seemed to be away from the camp, I sat up and headed outside. I heard others unzipping the doorways of their tents as well. We gathered in the middle, surrounded by our tents. I'm telling you, there's a bear hanging around here, Angie said, looking around nervously. Or someone playing a sick joke, Jake said. Have you ever heard an animal that sounded like that, I asked. Jake shook his head. No, but then again, we live in the city. Who knows what kind of wildlife lives out here in the brush? I don't think that was a bear, I said, or a person. And where the hell did it take off to so fast? Well, whatever it was, Kyle said, shining his flashlight into the trees. I think we spooked it away. Let's head back to bed. We've got some hiking to do tomorrow. Kyle was right. Whatever it was probably was spooked and ran off. We headed back to our tents with no more interruptions for the remainder of the night. The following day, we were on our way again. This time we would hike about 2 miles to our next location. It was another beautiful day. We talked a bit about what had happened the night before, but for the most part, by the time we arrived at the next location, it was all but forgotten. This next scene was to be used for a scene when Angie's character is forced to look for help and has to leave Kyle back at the camp. It was what we referred to as the meltdown scene. Angie gets disoriented by the woods and has a meltdown. She doesn't know which way is up or which way is down and screams at the silent trees around her. Epic. I helped Angie get ready for a scene. We wanted her to look disoriented and scared. Mascara running down her face from crying, her hair in tangles, dirt on her face. Like I said, epic. We began filming the scene. Angie began her sobbing, falls on the ground and then gets back up. Then she begins running in circles, disoriented by the trees around her. She's confused and anxious. And then she looks up to the heavens and lets out a dramatic scream. The scene was great, and Angie did great, but we decided to do a few more takes. On the third take, Angie looks up to the sky and wails. No sooner does the wail leave her lips when... which was then followed by the sound of branches breaking. We all turned to look and could see what looked like a person headed in our direction. They kept disappearing behind trees, but then would come back into view. Who's that? Kyle asked. A hiker? Maybe? Jake answered, perplexed. Guys, I don't think that's a hiker, I said as I pointed the camera towards the figure. It's too big to be a human. It's a fucking bear. I knew it, Angie said on the edge of hysteria. No, we were all wrong. Okay, so this is where things get weird and intense. It wasn't a hiker, and it wasn't a bear. The only thing I can even suggest what we were looking at was a Sasquatch. Yes, Bigfoot. And it was headed right at us. We heard branches snap off of trees as it brushed past, and by the way it was walking towards us, it seemed pissed off. All I could think was Angie's screaming must have spooked it somehow, or it thought another Sasquatch was under attack, or we were just annoying it. Either way, it was headed right for us and coming fast. There was a moment of panic, and then we did the next thing we could think of. We ran. We left everything behind, and we got the hell out of there. As we ran, we could hear the sound of branches snapping behind us and the sound that Bigfoot makes. We were in complete panic mode at this point. A fucking Sasquatch was chasing us, and we were miles inside the woods. It was almost as if our movie had come to life. The ground was uneven, making it hard to judge the landscape, and the last thing we needed was for someone to get injured. For real. The sound of branches snapping stopped, and finally we stopped running to catch our breath and to get aware of our surroundings. We didn't say anything for a few minutes as we listened. The only sounds we could hear now was the sounds of the birds chirping around us. No more sounds of branches snapping, and no more hollers from Bigfoot. That thing must have chased us a quarter of a mile. My cell phone was in my pocket, as was the map, and I checked to make sure it had a signal. It did, thank God. And then I called the National Parks office and told them we had been chased by a wild animal, possibly a bear. Since my cell phone had GPS, I was able to give her our coordinates. The lady on the phone said a park ranger was on his way up. A ranger arrived about 10 minutes later on an ATV. We were done camping at this point. We just wanted to go back for our stuff and head home. Thankfully, the ranger was happy to help us go back to our spot. When we arrived back, our stuff was still there, laying in the same place we dropped it. The ranger asked us if it was a black bear that had chased us. I think I may have recorded it, I told the ranger as I ran back the video on the camera. The camera didn't get a good picture, but it did catch whatever chased us as it ran through the trees toward us. I played the video for the ranger and then watched as all the blood seemed to drain out of his face. Well now, the ranger said, letting out a long wind of air, I don't think that was a bear that chased you. What do you think it was? I asked. The ranger looked at all of us. Well, I really can't say, but I will say you kids are damn lucky to have gotten away from that thing. Chances are it was just trying to scare you. If it wanted to kill you, I doubt you would have been able to outrun it, not with the strides that thing was taking. We all looked at each other, and it was obvious we were all thinking the same thing. Let's get out of here, I said.